Marcus Fletcher had been a royal guard for 12 years, and in all that time, nothing had prepared him for what he would discover on that foggy October morning. The ancient Blackwood Castle stood tall against the gray sky, its weathered stones holding centuries of secrets within their walls. Marcus walked his usual patrol route through the castle's lower corridors, his heavy boots echoing against the cold stone floors. The castle had been in the Blackwood family for over 400 years, passed down from generation to generation. King Edmund Blackwood III currently ruled the small kingdom of Aldermore, a peaceful realm nestled between rolling hills and dense forests. The castle itself was a maze of corridors, chambers, and forgotten passages that even the oldest servants couldn't fully map. Marcus had always been curious about the castle's history. Unlike the other guards who simply did their duty and went home, he found himself drawn to the old tapestries, the faded paintings, and the mysterious doors that seemed to lead nowhere. His fellow guards often teased him about his interest in dusty old rooms and forgotten stories, but Marcus couldn't help himself. That morning started like any other. Marcus arrived at dawn for his shift, exchanged pleasantries with the night guards, and began his rounds. The castle was quiet, with most of the royal family still asleep in their chambers. King Edmund was known for rising early, but even he wouldn't be awake for another hour. As Marcus walked through the east wing, he noticed something odd. There was a draft coming from somewhere it shouldn't be. He had walked this corridor thousands of times, and he knew every stone, every crack, every shadow. But today, there was a cool breeze flowing from what appeared to be a solid wall. Curious, Marcus approached the wall more closely. It was covered in an old tapestry depicting a hunting scene, with nobles on horseback chasing a magnificent stag through a forest. The tapestry had always been there, as far as Marcus knew, but now he noticed that it was moving slightly in the mysterious breeze. He reached out and carefully lifted the edge of the tapestry. Behind it, instead of the solid stone wall he expected, there was a narrow opening. It wasn't a proper door, but rather a gap between stones that had somehow been concealed. The opening was just wide enough for a person to squeeze through, and beyond it, Marcus could see nothing but darkness. His heart began to race. In 12 years of service, he had never seen this opening before. How was it possible that such a passage existed without anyone knowing about it? Marcus looked around to make sure he was alone, then decided to investigate further. He squeezed through the narrow opening, finding himself in a cramped stone corridor that seemed to run parallel to the main hallway. The air was stale and cold, suggesting that this passage hadn't been used in a very long time. Marcus pulled out his small lantern and lit it, casting dancing shadows on the rough stone walls. The corridor stretched ahead into darkness, and Marcus could see that it gradually sloped downward. Ancient spider webs hung from the ceiling, and the floor was covered in a thin layer of dust that showed no recent footprints. Whatever this passage was, it had been forgotten for decades, possibly even centuries. As he walked deeper into the hidden corridor, Marcus began to wonder about its purpose. Was it a secret escape route built during one of the kingdom's many conflicts? Or perhaps a way for servants to move through the castle without being seen? The construction was rough and utilitarian, unlike the ornate hallways of the main castle. After walking for what felt like 10 minutes, Marcus came to a junction where the corridor split into 3 different directions. One path continued straight ahead, still sloping downward. The second turned sharply to the left and seemed to curve back toward the main castle. The third path headed to the right and appeared to slope upward. Marcus paused, trying to orient himself within the castle's layout. If his calculations were correct, the left path would lead toward the royal chambers, while the right path might connect to the castle's towers. The straight path, however, seemed to be heading toward an area of the castle he wasn't familiar with, possibly even beyond the main structure. Deciding to follow his instincts, Marcus chose the straight path. As he walked, he noticed that the walls began to change. The rough stone gave way to more carefully carved blocks, and he began to see symbols etched into the walls. They weren't letters or words in any language he recognized, but rather strange geometric patterns and what appeared to be astronomical symbols. The passage continued to slope downward, and Marcus realized he must now be well below the main floor of the castle, perhaps even below the dungeons. He had never heard of any rooms or chambers at this depth, yet the passage seemed to have a definite destination. After another few minutes of walking, Marcus saw a faint light ahead. As he approached, he realized that the light was coming from an opening in the passage wall. The opening was larger than the one he had entered through, more like a proper doorway, though it had no actual door. Marcus stepped through the opening and found himself in a circular chamber unlike anything he had ever seen. The room was illuminated by an eerie, pale light that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The walls were covered in more of the strange symbols he had seen in the passage, but here they were more elaborate and seemed to form complex patterns that made his eyes water when he tried to follow them. In the center of the chamber was a raised platform made of black stone, and on the platform sat a chest made of some kind of dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The chest was about the size of a small table and was covered in intricate engravings that matched the symbols on the walls. Marcus approached the chest cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. Every instinct told him that he was in a place where he shouldn't be, discovering something that had been hidden for good reason. Yet his curiosity was stronger than his fear, and he found himself drawn to the mysterious chest like a moth to a flame. The chest had no visible lock, just a simple latch that appeared to be made of the same dark metal as the rest of the chest. Marcus reached out and touched the latch, surprised to find that the metal was warm, despite the coldness of the chamber. As his fingers made contact with the latch, he felt a strange tingling sensation, as if the chest was somehow alive and aware of his presence. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should return to the surface and report his discovery to his superiors. But the opportunity to uncover a secret that had been hidden for possibly centuries was too tempting to resist. Marcus took a deep breath and lifted the latch. The chest opened with a soft click, and immediately the chamber was filled with a brighter light that emanated from within the chest itself. Marcus shielded his eyes for a moment, then looked down to see what lay inside. What he saw took his breath away and made him question everything he thought he knew about the castle, the kingdom, and the royal family he had sworn to protect. The chest contained objects that seemed to defy explanation, artifacts that belonged in fairy tales rather than reality, and documents that suggested the history of Aldermore was far more complex and mysterious than anyone had ever imagined. Marcus stared into the chest, his mind reeling as he tried to process what he was seeing. He knew that this discovery would change everything, not just for him, but for the entire kingdom. The question was, what should he do with this knowledge? As he stood there in the glowing chamber, surrounded by ancient symbols and faced with impossible artifacts, Marcus realized that his life as a simple royal guard was over. He had stumbled upon something that would force him to make choices he had never imagined, and the consequences of those choices would ripple through the kingdom for years to come. The secrets hidden in the vault were about to be revealed, and Marcus Fletcher would be the one to bring them to light. But first, he needed to understand exactly what he had found, and what it meant for the royal family he had served so faithfully for 12 long years. Marcus leaned closer to the chest, his lantern casting additional light into its mysterious depths. The first thing that caught his attention was a collection of ancient scrolls, their parchment yellowed with age but remarkably well preserved. Each scroll was tied with a golden ribbon that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. With trembling hands, Marcus carefully lifted the first scroll from the chest. As soon as his fingers touched the parchment, he felt that same strange tingling sensation he had experienced with the latch. The scroll seemed to pulse with energy, as if it contained something far more powerful than mere words on paper. He untied the golden ribbon and carefully unrolled the scroll. The text was written in an elegant script that seemed to shift and change as he looked at it. At first, the words appeared to be in an ancient language he didn't recognize, but as he continued to stare, the letters began to rearrange themselves until they formed words he could understand. The scroll contained what appeared to be a genealogy of the Blackwood family, but it went back much further than any official record Marcus had ever seen. According to this document, the Blackwood lineage could be traced back over 2,000 years, far predating the establishment of the kingdom of Aldermore itself. But what truly shocked Marcus were the names and descriptions listed alongside each generation of Blackwoods. According to the scroll, many of his ancestors possessed abilities that could only be described as magical. One was said to have the power to communicate with animals, another could heal any wound with a touch, and yet another could see glimpses of the future. Marcus read on, his amazement growing with each line. The scroll described how the first Blackwood, a man named Aldrich the Wise, had made a pact with ancient beings of power in exchange for protecting a great secret. In return for their guardianship, the Blackwood family would be blessed with supernatural abilities and would rule over the land for as long as they kept their sacred promise. The document went on to explain that each generation of Blackwoods had been born with these gifts, but over the centuries, as the world changed and people became more skeptical of magic, the family had been forced to hide their true nature. They had created the public persona of ordinary royalty while secretly continuing their ancient duties. Marcus set down the first scroll and reached for another. This one contained detailed maps of the kingdom, but they showed places that didn't appear on any modern map. There were hidden valleys, secret forests, and underground cities that supposedly existed beneath Aldermore. The maps were marked with symbols indicating the locations of other magical artifacts, ancient shrines, and places of power that the Blackwood family had been charged with protecting. One location on the map particularly caught Marcus's attention. It was marked as the Sanctuary of the First Light and appeared to be located directly beneath the castle itself. According to the notations on the map, this sanctuary contained the source of the Blackwood family's power and was the most sacred site in all of Aldermore. As Marcus studied the map more closely, he realized that the hidden chamber where he now stood was just one of many such rooms connected by a vast network of secret passages. The entire castle was apparently built on top of this underground complex, which served as both a fortress and a repository for magical artifacts. The third scroll contained what appeared to be instructions for various rituals and ceremonies. Marcus could barely comprehend what he was reading. Spells for controlling the weather, incantations for speaking with the spirits of the dead, and formulas for creating potions that could grant temporary magical abilities to ordinary humans. But it was the fourth scroll that truly made Marcus's blood run cold. This document contained a prophecy written in the same shifting script as the other scrolls. As the words rearranged themselves before his eyes, Marcus read about a coming darkness that would threaten not just Aldermore, but the entire world. According to the prophecy, a time would come when the ancient enemies of the Blackwood family would return to claim what they believed was rightfully theirs. These enemies, described as beings of shadow and malice, had been banished centuries ago by the first Blackwood king, but the prophecy warned that their prison was weakening and they would soon break free. The document went on to describe signs that would herald the return of these dark beings. There would be unnatural weather patterns, animals would behave strangely, and people would begin to have vivid nightmares filled with visions of darkness consuming the land. Most chillingly, the prophecy stated that these signs had already begun to manifest. Marcus thought back over the past few months and realized with growing horror that many of these signs had indeed occurred. The kingdom had experienced an unusual number of violent storms. Farmers had reported that their livestock was acting aggressively, and the castle's physician had mentioned an increase in people seeking treatment for persistent nightmares. The prophecy concluded with a warning that only a true descendant of Aldrich the Wise, one who fully embraced their magical heritage, would be able to stand against the coming darkness. If the current generation of Blackwoods failed to acknowledge and develop their powers, the kingdom would fall, and the darkness would spread across the entire world. Marcus carefully rolled up the scrolls and placed them back in the chest. His mind was reeling from what he had just learned. If these documents were authentic, and something deep in his bones told him they were, then everything he thought he knew about his kingdom and his king was a lie. He turned his attention to the other objects in the chest. There was a crown made of a metal he didn't recognize, its surface covered in gems that seemed to contain swirling galaxies within their depths. Beside the crown lay a sword with a blade that appeared to be made of crystallized light, and a staff topped with an orb that pulsed with the same pale radiance that illuminated the chamber. At the bottom of the chest, wrapped in a cloth that felt like it was woven from moonbeams, Marcus found a mirror. When he held it up, his reflection seemed wrong somehow. Instead of showing his familiar face, the mirror revealed a version of himself that looked older and wiser, with eyes that held depths of knowledge he had never possessed. As he stared into the mirror, Marcus began to see images that weren't his reflection at all. He saw King Edmund as he truly was, not the mild-mannered ruler everyone believed him to be, but a man struggling with powers he barely understood and responsibilities that weighed heavily on his soul. The king's apparent weakness wasn't weakness at all, but rather the burden of carrying ancient secrets that could drive a lesser man to madness. The mirror showed Marcus other things as well. He saw the kingdom's enemies gathering in the shadows, creatures of darkness that waited impatiently for their chance to strike. He saw the hidden network of passages beneath the castle, each room filled with artifacts of unimaginable power. And he saw himself, standing at a crossroads where the choices he made would determine the fate of everyone he had sworn to protect. As the visions in the mirror faded, Marcus heard footsteps echoing from the passage he had used to enter the chamber. Someone was coming, and they were moving quickly. Marcus quickly replaced all the items in the chest and closed it, the chamber's light dimming as the lid shut. He pressed himself against the wall beside the entrance, trying to remain hidden as the footsteps grew closer. The light from a torch began to flicker against the walls of the passage, and Marcus could hear voices speaking in hushed, urgent tones. "Are you certain you felt something?" a woman's voice asked. "Positive," replied a man with a deep, resonant voice that Marcus recognized with a shock. It was King Edmund himself. "The wards around the vault have been disturbed. Someone has been here." Marcus's heart hammered in his chest as he realized the gravity of his situation. He had not only discovered the royal family's greatest secret, but had been caught in the act by the king himself. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. In moments, he would be discovered, and he had no idea what the consequences might be. The torchlight grew brighter, and Marcus could see shadows moving in the passage. He closed his eyes and tried to prepare himself for whatever was about to happen, knowing that his life would never be the same again. "The chest has been opened recently," the woman's voice observed as they entered the chamber. "The magical resonance is still strong. Then, our visitor may still be here," King Edmund replied, his voice taking on an edge of authority that Marcus had rarely heard before. "Show yourself. There's no point in hiding now." Marcus took a deep breath, stepped out from behind the wall, and came face to face with his king and a woman he had never seen before. The woman was tall and elegant, with silver hair that seemed to glow in the chamber's pale light, and eyes that held the same depth of ancient knowledge he had seen in his own reflection in the magical mirror. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, dropping to one knee despite the surreal circumstances. "I can explain everything." King Edmund studied Marcus for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but filled with a weight that seemed to press down on the entire chamber. "Rise, Marcus Fletcher," the king said. "It seems the time for secrets has finally come to an end." Marcus rose slowly, his eyes moving between King Edmund and the mysterious woman who stood beside him. In the pale light of the chamber, the king looked different than he ever had before. Gone was the mild-mannered ruler who seemed to drift through court life with gentle detachment. Instead, Marcus saw a man whose eyes held centuries of wisdom and whose bearing radiated an authority that seemed to make the very air around him shimmer with power. "Your Majesty, I never meant to intrude," Marcus began, but King Edmund raised a hand to silence him. "Peace, Marcus," the king said, his voice carrying a warmth that surprised the guard. "You have stumbled upon something that was perhaps meant to be found. Allow me to introduce Lady Morgana, the keeper of our family's ancient knowledge and my advisor in matters that the court can never know about." Lady Morgana stepped forward, her silver hair catching the chamber's ethereal light. When she spoke, her voice had a melodic quality that seemed to resonate with the very stones of the chamber itself. "Marcus Fletcher," she said, studying him with those ancient eyes. "You have served the Blackwood family faithfully for 12 years, have you not? In all that time, you have shown curiosity about the castle's history, integrity in your duties, and discretion in your observations. These qualities did not go unnoticed." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "You've been watching me?" King Edmund stepped closer to the chest, placing his hand upon its dark surface. Immediately, the chamber's light grew brighter, revealing details Marcus hadn't noticed before. The symbols on the walls began to glow with their own inner fire, and he could see that they formed a complex pattern that seemed to tell a story in pictures. "We have been watching everyone, Marcus," the king explained. "The burden of our family's secret requires us to be vigilant about who can be trusted with the truth. You see, what you discovered in those scrolls is only the beginning of a much larger and more dangerous reality." Lady Morgana moved to stand beside one of the walls, her hand tracing the glowing symbols as she spoke. "The magic that flows through the Blackwood bloodline is not a gift, Marcus. It is a responsibility that has been passed down through generations, along with the duty to protect this world from forces that would destroy it." As she spoke, the symbols on the wall began to move and shift, forming new patterns that illustrated her words. Marcus watched in fascination as the pictures showed the story of Aldrich the Wise, the first Blackwood king, battling creatures of shadow and darkness in a war that raged across the land. 2,000 years ago, the king continued, "My ancestor made a pact with beings of immense power, the Guardians of Light, as they came to be known. These beings had been fighting a war against the Shadow Realm, a dimension of pure malevolence that sought to consume our world and everything in it." The symbols on the wall showed Aldrich kneeling before towering figures made of pure light, accepting a crown that blazed like a miniature sun. As he placed it upon his head, power flowed through him, transforming him from a mortal man into something far more than human. "The Guardians were dying," Lady Morgana explained, her voice heavy with the weight of ancient sadness. "They had fought the shadows for millennia, but they were losing. In desperation, they chose to pass their power to a human bloodline, trusting that mortals might succeed where they had failed." Marcus watched as the wall showed Aldrich using his new powers to push back the shadows, sealing them behind barriers of light that stretched across multiple dimensions. The victory came at a great cost. The Guardians gave the last of their essence to create the seals, leaving the Blackwood family as the sole protectors of the world. "But the seals were never meant to last forever," King Edmund said grimly. "They require constant maintenance, powered by the magical energy that flows through our bloodline. Each generation of Blackwoods has had to secretly perform rituals to strengthen the barriers, all while maintaining the pretense of being ordinary rulers." Lady Morgana's expression grew troubled. "Unfortunately, the task has become more difficult with each passing century. As the world has changed and people have turned away from belief in magic, the power available to us has diminished. The current generation of Blackwoods is the weakest in our history." Marcus felt a growing sense of dread. The prophecy mentioned something about the seals failing. "How long do we have?" The king and Lady Morgana exchanged a meaningful look before the king answered. "According to our calculations, the barriers will begin to collapse within the next year. The signs you read about in the prophecy have been manifesting for months now, and they're growing stronger." As if to emphasize his words, the chamber suddenly trembled, and Marcus could hear what sounded like distant thunder echoing through the stone walls. But there was something wrong with the sound. It was too regular, too rhythmic, like the beating of an enormous heart. "What was that?" Marcus asked, instinctively reaching for his sword. "The prisoners grow restless," Lady Morgana replied grimly. "They can sense that their prison is weakening, and they're testing the boundaries of their cage. Each time they push against the seals, we feel it here in the heart of our power." King Edmund opened the chest once more, and the chamber filled with brilliant light. He lifted out the crown Marcus had seen earlier, its gems swirling with captured starlight. As he placed it upon his head, his entire appearance transformed. His usual mild demeanor vanished, replaced by the bearing of a true king whose authority extended far beyond the mortal realm. "This is who I truly am, Marcus," the king said, his voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of reality. "Not the weak ruler my subjects believe me to be, but the last guardian standing between them and unimaginable darkness." Lady Morgana retrieved the crystalline sword, and the staff topped with its pulsing orb. As she held them, Marcus could see that she too was transformed. Power radiated from her like heat from a forge, and her eyes now blazed with inner fire. The question now she said to Marcus, is whether you will help us in the battle to come, or whether we must find another way to ensure your silence about what you have learned. Marcus felt the weight of the moment settling upon his shoulders. Everything he had believed about his life, his kingdom, and his duty had been shattered in the space of a few hours. But, as he looked at the king and Lady Morgana, he realized that his choice was not really a choice at all. I swore an oath to protect the royal family and the kingdom, he said firmly. If what you're telling me is true, then that oath extends far beyond what I ever imagined. What do you need me to do? King Edmund smiled for the first time since entering the chamber, and Marcus could see genuine relief in his transformed features. First, you must understand the full scope of what we face. The creatures imprisoned in the Shadow Realm are not mere monsters, Marcus. They are entities of pure malevolence, beings that feed on fear and despair and grow stronger with every life they extinguish. The symbols on the walls shifted again, showing images of the shadow creatures in all their terrifying glory. Marcus saw beings that seemed to be made of living darkness, their forms shifting and writhing like smoke given malevolent purpose. They had no fixed shape, but he could see eyes like burning coals and mouths filled with teeth that seemed to devour light itself. If they escape, Lady Morgana continued, they will not simply conquer our kingdom. They will spread across the world like a plague, consuming everything in their path until nothing remains but empty darkness. Every living thing will either be destroyed or corrupted into serving their endless hunger. Marcus studied the images on the wall, trying to understand the true scope of the threat. How many of them are there? Millions, the king replied simply. Perhaps tens of millions. The Shadow Realm was not just a prison for a few powerful beings, but an entire dimension filled with creatures that exist only to destroy and consume. The chamber trembled again, more violently this time. Dust fell from the ceiling, and Marcus could hear what sounded like voices calling out from impossibly far away. The voices were speaking in a language he didn't understand, but their tone was unmistakably one of rage and hunger. They know we're here, Lady Morgana observed, her grip tightening on the staff. Our presence in this sacred chamber has attracted their attention. They're trying to break through the barriers between dimensions to reach us. King Edmund placed his hand on the chest once more, and Marcus could see waves of golden light flowing from his fingers into the dark metal. The trembling gradually subsided, and the distant voices faded back into silence. The seals will hold for now, the king said, but Marcus could see the effort had cost him. Beads of sweat stood out on his forehead, and his breathing was labored. But each time we use our power to reinforce them, we grow weaker. We're fighting a losing battle, and we all know it. Marcus felt a surge of determination. Then, we need to find a way to win. There has to be something we can do besides just delay the inevitable. Lady Morgana looked at him with new respect. You have the heart of a true guardian, Marcus Fletcher. But the truth is, there may be only one way to permanently restore the seals and prevent the Shadow Realm from breaking through. She moved to another section of the wall, where the symbols showed a figure that looked remarkably like King Edmund standing before the barriers between dimensions. But, in this image, the king was not simply reinforcing the seals. He was merging with them, becoming part of the barrier itself. The ultimate sacrifice, King Edmund said quietly. One that my family has hoped to avoid for 2,000 years, but which may now be inevitable. The only way to permanently strengthen the seals is for a Blackwood descendant to give their life force entirely to the barriers, becoming a permanent guardian between the dimensions. Marcus stared at the image on the wall, understanding flooding through him. You're planning to sacrifice yourself to save the kingdom. If necessary, the king replied. But first, we must try every other option available to us. The ancient texts speak of artifacts of power that might provide another solution, and there are allies in other realms who might come to our aid if properly summoned. Lady Morgana turned back to Marcus, her expression serious. This is why we need someone we can trust completely. The rituals required to contact these potential allies are dangerous, and they must be performed in secret. If our enemies learn what we're attempting, they will strike before we're ready. Marcus nodded, feeling the full weight of responsibility settling upon his shoulders. Tell me what I need to do. The king and Lady Morgana began to outline a plan that was both desperate and dangerous. Marcus would continue his duties as a royal guard while secretly helping them prepare for the coming battle. He would learn to use the network of hidden passages to move artifacts and supplies without detection, and he would help them identify other potential allies within the castle. But first, there was something else they needed to show him. Something that would complete his understanding of just how high the stakes truly were. "Come," King Edmund said, moving toward a section of the chamber wall that looked identical to all the others. "There's one more secret you need to see before you fully commit to this path. The true source of our power lies deeper still, in chambers that no one but the reigning monarch and their closest advisor have ever entered." As the king pressed his hand against the wall, Marcus could see symbols he hadn't noticed before beginning to glow. Slowly, silently, a section of the wall slid aside, revealing another passage that descended into depths even greater than those they had already explored. "What you have seen so far," Lady Morgana said as they prepared to descend, "is merely the antechamber to the real heart of our power. Below us lies the sanctuary of the First Light, where the original pact was made and where the fate of the world will ultimately be decided." Marcus took a deep breath and followed them into the deeper darkness, knowing that with each step he took, he moved further from his old life and closer to a destiny he could never have imagined. The battle for the survival of the world was about to begin, and he had just become one of its most important players. The descent into the sanctuary of the First Light took nearly an hour, following a spiral staircase carved directly into the living rock beneath the castle. As they went deeper, Marcus noticed that the temperature began to rise, and the air itself seemed to thrum with an energy that made his skin tingle. The walls here were not decorated with symbols, but appeared to be made of some kind of crystalline substance that gave off its own soft radiance. "We are now deeper beneath the earth than any mine in the kingdom," Lady Morgana explained as they continued their descent. This sanctuary was not built by human hands, but by the Guardians themselves as a focal point for their power. When they finally reached the bottom of the staircase, Marcus found himself standing before a pair of massive doors that appeared to be made of pure light given solid form. The doors stood at least 20 feet tall and were covered in patterns that seemed to move and shift like living things. As King Edmund approached them, the patterns began to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. "Only a true descendant of Aldrich can open these doors," the king explained, placing both hands flat against the luminous surface. "The Guardians built safeguards into this place to ensure that their power could never be misused." The doors slowly swung open with a sound like distant music, revealing a chamber that took Marcus's breath away. The sanctuary of the First Light was enormous, its domed ceiling reaching up into darkness far above their heads. The walls were lined with alcoves, each containing artifacts that blazed with their own inner fire. At the center of the chamber stood a raised dais, upon which sat a throne that seemed to be carved from a single massive crystal. But it was what floated above the throne that truly amazed Marcus. Suspended in the air, rotating slowly, was a sphere of pure light about the size of a person. The sphere pulsed with energy that Marcus could feel in his bones, and, as he watched, he could see smaller lights moving within it like stars in a miniature galaxy. "The heart of the First Light," King Edmund said reverently. "The last remnant of the Guardian's essence, and the source of all power that flows through the Blackwood bloodline. It is also the key component in the barrier that holds the Shadow Realm at bay." Lady Morgana moved to one of the alcoves and withdrew what appeared to be a crystalline tablet covered in more of the shifting script Marcus had seen in the vault above. This contains the complete history of the war between light and shadow, including prophecies that have guided the Blackwood family for 2 millennia. As she held the tablet, words began to appear in the air above it, visible as letters of fire that hung unsupported in space. Marcus could read them clearly, though he sensed that the language was being translated for his benefit by some power inherent in the sanctuary itself. The tablet told a story that was even more incredible than what Marcus had already learned. According to the record, the conflict between light and shadow was not unique to their world, but was part of a cosmic war that raged across multiple dimensions and realities. The Guardians had been soldiers in this greater conflict, and Earth was just one of many battlefields where the forces of creation fought against the powers of entropy and destruction. The Shadow Realm, King Edmund explained as Marcus read, is not simply a prison we created for our enemies. It is a beachhead, a foothold that the forces of darkness established in our reality. If they succeed in breaking free here, they will have access to countless other worlds through the dimensional pathways that connect all realities. Marcus felt the weight of this revelation settling upon him. You're saying that if we fail, it won't just be our world that falls. Potentially billions of worlds, Lady Morgana confirmed grimly. The responsibility placed upon the Blackwood family extends far beyond the borders of Aldermore, or even of Earth itself. We are the guardians of the cosmic balance in this sector of existence. As if responding to their conversation, the heart of the first light pulsed more brightly, and Marcus could hear what sounded like whispers coming from the sphere itself. The voices spoke in harmonious tones that seemed to bypass his ears entirely and speak directly to his mind. They're trying to communicate, King Edmund said, approaching the throne. The remnants of the Guardian's consciousness still exist within the heart, and they sometimes try to offer guidance in times of crisis. The whispers grew stronger, and suddenly, Marcus could understand them. The voices were speaking of the present danger, confirming that the barriers were indeed failing faster than expected. But they also spoke of hope, of a possibility that had not been attempted in the 2,000 years since the original pact was made. They're saying something about a new guardian, Marcus said, surprised by his ability to interpret the ethereal voices. Someone who could share the burden with the Blackwood bloodline. Lady Morgana's eyes widened with sudden understanding. The awakening ritual, she breathed. It's mentioned in the oldest texts, but we always assumed it was too dangerous to attempt. King Edmund looked intrigued, but cautious. Explain. According to legend, Lady Morgana said, moving to another alcove and retrieving additional tablets, the original guardians had the power to awaken the latent magical potential in worthy mortals. The ritual was used to create new guardians when their numbers were depleted in battle. The voices from the heart grew more urgent, and Marcus found himself stepping closer to the throne. As he approached, the sphere of light began to descend, coming to hover just above the crystal seat. It seems they want to attempt the ritual with you, Marcus, King Edmund observed. But I must warn you, the texts speak of great danger. The process of awakening magical abilities in someone not born with them can be fatal. Marcus looked around the sanctuary, taking in the incredible artifacts and the pulsing heart of the first light. He thought about everything he had learned, about the cosmic stakes and the billions of lives that hung in the balance. The choice, when it came down to it, was no choice at all. What do I need to do? He asked. The ritual that followed was unlike anything Marcus could have imagined. At the direction of the voices from the heart, King Edmund and Lady Morgana positioned him on the crystal throne while they took places at specific points around the chamber. The artifacts in the alcoves began to glow more brightly, and the symbols on the walls came alive with dancing light. As the heart of the first light settled onto Marcus's chest, he felt power beyond description flowing into his body. It started as a warm tingling in his limbs, but quickly intensified into something that felt like lightning racing through his veins. His vision exploded with colors he had never seen before, and he could suddenly perceive dimensions of reality that had been invisible to him moments before. The process was agonizing and ecstatic at the same time. Marcus felt as though he was being torn apart and rebuilt at a fundamental level. His consciousness expanded until he could sense the barriers between dimensions, feeling the pressure that the shadow creatures were exerting against their prison. He could see the weak points in the seals and understand exactly how the cosmic balance was maintained. When the transformation was complete, Marcus found himself fundamentally changed. He could still feel his human self at his core, but layered over that was something far greater. Power flowed through him like a river of starlight, and knowledge that had been accumulated over millennia was now part of his memories. How do you feel? King Edmund asked, his voice filled with concern and hope in equal measure. Marcus stood slowly, marveling at the way the world looked different now. He could see the magical energies that flowed through everything, could perceive the connections between all living things, and, most importantly, could feel his own strength adding to the barriers that held the Shadow Realm at bay. "Different," he said finally, "but ready. I can feel them pressing against the seals, but now I can help hold them back." Lady Morgana smiled with relief. The ritual worked. For the first time in generations, there are two guardians sharing the burden instead of just one. Over the following weeks, Marcus learned to balance his new existence with his old life. To the other guards and castle staff, he remained the same person they had always known. But beneath the surface, he was constantly working with King Edmund and Lady Morgana to strengthen the dimensional barriers and prepare for the final confrontation with the shadow creatures. They discovered that the ritual had done more than just awaken Marcus's magical potential. It had also provided them with new insights into the nature of their enemies. Through his enhanced perceptions, Marcus could detect shadow creatures that had already begun to slip through the weakening barriers in small numbers. These advanced scouts were testing the defenses and gathering information about the current state of the world. The battle, when it finally came, was unlike anything in recorded history. The shadow creatures launched a coordinated assault on multiple weak points in the barriers simultaneously, trying to overwhelm the Guardians' ability to respond. But, with Marcus and King Edmund working together, they were able to reinforce the seals faster than their enemies could break them down. The final confrontation took place not in the physical world, but in the spaces between dimensions, where the laws of reality were more fluid and the power of will could reshape the very fabric of existence. Marcus found himself fighting beings of pure malevolence with weapons made of crystallized light, defending barriers that existed only in his mind, but which protected countless worlds from annihilation. The victory came at a cost. Both Marcus and King Edmund were forever changed by the experience, their human selves permanently intertwined with the cosmic forces they wielded. They could never again live entirely normal lives, but they had succeeded in not only maintaining the barriers, but actually strengthening them beyond their original design. In the years that followed, the kingdom of Aldermore entered a period of unprecedented prosperity and peace. The people never knew how close they had come to destruction, or that their safety depended on the vigilance of guardians who walked among them in secret. Marcus continued his duties as a royal guard, but he also trained a new generation of protectors who could help maintain the barriers in future years. The Sanctuary of the First Light became a school where worthy individuals could learn to wield the power of the Guardians, ensuring that the kingdom would never again depend on just one or two people to stand against the darkness. The vault that Marcus had stumbled upon remained hidden beneath the castle, but it was no longer a secret repository of forgotten knowledge. Instead, it became a meeting place where the Guardians could gather to share information and coordinate their efforts to protect not just their world, but all the worlds that depended on their vigilance. Lady Morgana eventually revealed that she herself was not human but one of the last surviving Guardians, who had taken mortal form to better guide and protect the Blackwood family. With the barriers now strengthened and a new generation of Guardians being trained, she was finally able to rest, knowing that the cosmic balance was in capable hands. Marcus often reflected on the morning when he had first noticed that strange draft in the castle corridor. Such a small thing, such an innocent curiosity, had led to discoveries and responsibilities beyond anything he could have imagined. But, as he stood watch over the kingdom, using senses that could perceive threats from across multiple dimensions, he knew that every choice he had made had been the right one. The kingdom was safe, the world was protected, and the light would continue to shine against the darkness for generations to come. And it had all started with a royal guard who was curious enough to investigate a tapestry that moved in a breeze that shouldn't have existed. The secrets of the vault had been revealed, but they had not brought destruction as many secrets do. Instead, they had brought salvation, transformation, and the promise of a future where the forces of light would always have guardians ready to stand against the shadows. In the end, Marcus realized that some secrets are hidden not because they are dangerous to know, but because the world must be ready for the truth they contain. His discovery had come at exactly the right moment, when the need was greatest, and when he was prepared to accept the responsibility that knowledge brings. The story of the royal guard who stumbled upon a hidden vault had become legend, though few would ever know the real truth of what had been found there. But, for those who did know, for those who carried the burden of protecting reality itself, it served as a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary destinies begin with the simplest acts of curiosity and courage.